Hi, it's Rachel with the Charlotte Mason Plenary. Today I'm interviewing two fantastic people from one fantastic podcast, John and Crystal Schindele from Charlotte Mason Says. Now they had me on their podcast because they wanted me to talk all about kindergarten because they're reading through Volume 1, Home Education, and they wanted me to talk about the 2 chapters that Charlotte wrote about kindergarten because I had just released my preschool and kindergarten CM Your Way form guide. So we have a great conversation and I want you to meet them. Here they are.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. All right, so tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Well, our oldest son is about to be 8, and when he first started doing more of official lessons, I told John that he needed to start reading the books with me, and he said, well, I want to run a podcast, so let's combine the 2.
With one stone, yeah.
And so we started a podcast, and we started reading a chapter of Parents and Children and then talking about it into microphones on a podcast. And
now that's interesting. So why did y'all start with Volume 2 and not with Volume 1?
So that was my my thought. So Crystal kind of had dove into the method and the activities and the actions of what you would do with the children.
Right.
I being dad, I didn't need to know the day in, day out work. That's not what was important to me. What I wanted to know was why we were doing all of the things we were doing so that I could be a support for Crystal and also come in to support with the children because I know why we're doing the things that we're doing. So we started with the philosophy because in my opinion, the reasons why you do the things that you do are so much more important than the specific things that you actually do.
Love it. I love starting with the why.
Yeah.
Okay, so but
we started right around Thanksgiving of 2018. And finished up Parents and Children in just about a year and went right into home education and started going with Volume 1.
So Volume 1 has a lot more, oh, that's my little dog coughing in the background there. All right. So Volume 1 has a lot more of the nitty gritty day to day. So how are y'all? Oh my gosh, the dog. Can y'all take Lucy into the other room, please? Yes, my kids are still up. That's what happens when they become teenagers and stuff.
Oh man, when I was that age, I was up until all hours of the night.
Yes, exactly. All right, so okay, so Volume 1, you get more into the nitty gritty of the day to day. So how are y'all finding Volume 1 then?
Very convicting as to what I'm not doing.
Yeah, it's true.
But also very freeing as into this is what I can do and this is how I should be doing it and what I can move forward towards. So it's been a combination of both. And you throw in moving and you throw in sickness and you throw in
life,
enforced shelter in place.
Yeah.
And you learn how to move with things and adapt with things.
You do. Well, and the one thing I will say is that even though Volume 1 has a lot more of those specifics of how to do the day-to-day, Charlotte still talked a lot about why and why we're doing the things we're doing. And so even though home education is much more pointed towards how to actually run a Charlotte Mason homeschool, there's still a lot of that philosophy that's in there. And there's a lot of talking about habits and talking about why we do the lessons that we do and where we do them and when we do them and how we do them. And so it's been interesting for me to learn the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of it all, because those are things that I haven't learned yet because I haven't gone to conferences and I haven't read these books. And so it's been fascinating for me to learn these things.
I love how she intertwines the why with everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she does a really good job of that. So
And one thing I'm really excited for, looking forward to where we're going with the podcast, is we have guest speakers coming in for most of part 5. So all of these specific how to do the lessons, we have people like yourself coming in and talking to us about how to do it. And
yeah, I got to talk about the kindergarten section, right? The 2 chapters on kindergarten, and we had a really good chat about it.
We did. It was a lot of fun, and we'll definitely be releasing those as 2 separate podcasts because we talked for a while, which was really good. Kindergarten, it was something that we talked about during the show, is that she talks about habits twice, and she talks about kindergarten twice in the book, and she repeated both of those things because I think both of those things are so important to our work as home educators. And so I think it's perfect that we spent so long on those on the topic of kindergarten, because it's so fundamental and so integral to our children as they grow up to have a solid foundation for that education.
Right, and the 2 parts, the 2 sections on habits and then the 2 chapters on kindergarten are really the foundation and the basis for moving forward with formal studies and starting in Form 1.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
And we won't get into the spoiler of the questions she asks at the end of the chapter about kindergarten. You'll have to listen to the podcast for that. So I wanted to ask you, I know that y'all been using the annotated editions, and so how's that helped?
It has helped in getting the ideas that aren't quite modern day ideas, and the words that aren't quite typically used nowadays, and the references that aren't quite recent.
Right.
And for example, we just talked about Tolstoy, and he's rather old. and so these things that come up, you have done a beautiful job of pulling it out and pulling out the little nuggets of wisdom from Charlotte Mason, as well as putting it in a very approachable format.
Oh, thank you so much.
I have enjoyed reading through the annotated version.
Well, my goal is always to make it just a little bit easier to learn and to implement the method, right? So, when I started reading the volumes way back, 10, 12 years ago now, and I thought, why hasn't anybody ever annotated these things? So nobody ever did it, so I decided to do it. But
I'm
thank you.
excited to have the rest of them come out as well.
Thank you. I'm working on it. But like you said, life happens too.
Life happens. Well, I will say that's been one of the fun things as we went through volume 2, and now that we're going through volume 1, those are a lot of things that Crystal pulls out in our podcast as well. As she pulls out the kind of off the wall facts that you might not get just from reading through it. Who wrote the poem and which poem it was and when was it written and what's the full context.
But those details help you understand it better, which is what I love.
Absolutely. And so that's, like I was saying, we dive into some of those things in the podcast. And so having the annotated version has helped us to dive into those things in the podcast, because it's right there and easy for us to read.
You don't have to Google it and spend hours going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, which we've done.
Okay, so y'all are doing volume 1 now. Do you know which one you're doing next?
Nope.
Is there a next?
There will be a
next. I mean, we do have 6 volumes worth of information.
We've got a lot of material to work with.
When we were coming off of Parents and Children, the question was, do we want to go to number 1, where it's more of the how-to, or do we want to go to number 5, where it's, again, more philosophy? So we went to the how-to. And so now my thought, and I have given this a little bit of thought,
because I haven't really,
is do we move on to school education, where we're continuing into older years, or do we go back to number 5 and do more philosophy?
Interesting. So why 5 and not 6?
Because 6 is an overall view of one, and I would love to do 6 last. It was the last book she wrote. I and from what I remember, she had people reading all of her volumes, and while 6 is an overview, it doesn't have everything. So I really want to finish with that and
saving the best for last.
Get everything, all her supporting volumes, and then read her thesis volume.
Nice, like it.
That's my argument.
And I agree. Sounds good to me.
Tell us where we can find you.
We are on Facebook at Charlotte Mason Says, and Twitter, although we just kind of post that we
we
do
don't
stuff.
really do anything on Twitter.
We are on Instagram at Charlotte Mason Says, and we have email and our website, charlottemasonsays.com.
Excellent.
Yeah, you can find the podcast on any podcast player, and you can play us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify. Any of those things, we're on there. Just look for Charlotte Mason Says, and you'll find us.
Okay, so the chapters that we talked about on kindergarten, when are those episodes going to air?
That will be episode 75 and 76, and they will be coming out April 27th and May the 4th.
Excellent.
Be with you.
Love it. Okay, great. Thanks so much, you guys, for having me on your podcast and for joining me on the YouTube channel. I feel like we've been friends forever.
We have a common friend. We have a common influence.
Yes, we do. A good one, too. All right. Well, thank you guys so much, John and Crystal Schindele. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel.